The courtroom was silent. Every eye was fixed on the small girl standing beside the defendant's table. Sophia Walker, just 8 years old, barely reached the microphone. Her tiny fingers gripped the wooden railing in front of her. Her blonde ponytail trembled slightly, but when she looked up at the judge, her blue eyes burned with defiance. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and steady, "my daddy is not a liar." A wave of whispers spread across the room. Ethan Walker, seated at the defendant's table, felt his heart stop. Across the aisle, Nathan Cross, the ruthless prosecutor, smirked. "Your Honor, I'd like to remind the court that this is just a child." "I know what I'm saying," Sophia interrupted, her voice trembling but firm. She turned to the jury, scanning their faces. "If my dad goes to jail, then so should I." The room erupted in gasps. Even Ethan's lawyer, Jacob Whitmore, turned pale. This wasn't part of the plan. The judge, an older man with deep lines on his face, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "do you understand what you're saying?" Sophia nodded. "Yes." Then, with a deep breath, she said something that sent a chill through everyone in the room. "Because I helped him." A shockwave hit the courtroom. Ethan froze. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No." The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Order!" The jury exchanged uneasy glances. Even Nathan Cross, who had spent years tearing people apart in court, seemed momentarily shaken. The judge cleared his throat. "Explain yourself, young lady." Sophia turned to look at her father. Ethan's heart shattered. "You don't understand," she said. "My dad isn't a bad man. He was just trying to help someone. And if that's wrong, then I'm guilty too." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open. A man in a dark suit rushed in, a thick folder of documents in his hands. His face was flushed, his hair slightly disheveled. "Your Honor," he called out of breath. "New evidence has just come to light." Gasps filled the room once more. Ethan's lawyer sprang to his feet. "What? What evidence?" The judge frowned. "This court does not appreciate interruptions." "Please, Your Honor," the man begged, stepping forward. This could change everything. Ethan felt a flicker of hope in his chest. Sophia turned, gripping the railing tighter. She wasn't ready to give up. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "Approach the bench." The man hurried forward, placing the folder of documents in front of him. The judge opened it and scanned the contents, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. The room held its breath. After what felt like an eternity, the judge set the documents down, his expression unreadable. He looked up. "This," he said slowly, "is troubling." Ethan exhaled shakily. Could this be it? Could this finally clear his name? Nathan Cross straightened his tie. "Your Honor, I object to any last-minute evidence being introduced without proper review." The judge cut him off. Overruled. Ethan turned to Sophia, squeezing her hand. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered. "But I had to," she whispered back. "I couldn't let them think you were bad." Tears burned Ethan's eyes. No matter what happened next, at least his daughter believed in him. And maybe, just maybe, this evidence would save them both. The courtroom was silent except for the soft rustling of papers as Judge Holloway skimmed through the new documents. His expression remained unreadable, but his furrowed brows hinted at something troubling. Ethan Walker barely dared to breathe. Was this his way out? Sophia stood frozen at the witness stand, her small hands gripping the wooden railing. She turned her head slightly, trying to read the judge's face. Nathan Cross, the prosecutor, didn't bother hiding his frustration. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defense should not be allowed to introduce last-minute evidence without prior notice." The judge exhaled, tapping his fingers against the bench. "Mr. Cross, do you object because of procedure, or because you're afraid of what this evidence might reveal?" Cross clenched his jaw but said nothing. The judge looked over the papers once more, then turned to the man who had burst into the courtroom. He was still catching his breath, his tie slightly loosened. "Mr. Grayson," the judge addressed him, "please explain to the court what you've just handed me." The man nodded quickly, clearing his throat. Your Honor, these are financial records and security logs related to the night of the alleged crime. They prove that the key witness against Mr. Walker was not where he claimed to be. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Ethan's lawyer, Jacob Whitmore, stood up. Your Honor, this directly contradicts the prosecution's case. If the primary witness was lying, then all charges against my client are based on false testimony. Sophia's eyes widened. Does that mean my dad can go home? She whispered. Ethan squeezed her hand under the table. Not yet, sweetheart. The judge turned to Cross. Mr. Cross, do you have a response? Cross adjusted his tie, clearly flustered. Your Honor, I request a recess to review this so-called evidence. Judge Holloway nodded. Very well. This court will recess for 1 hour while the prosecution examines the documents. He banged his gavel, and just like that, the tension in the room cracked. Ethan stepped into the hallway, his mind racing. 1 hour. That was all the time they had to hope for a miracle. Sophia walked beside him, her tiny hand still gripping his tightly. Even though he had told her to stay quiet, she had defied him. And somehow, it had made a difference. He knelt in front of her. Sophia, what you did back there, he swallowed. That was very brave. Her blue eyes filled with determination. I just told the truth, Daddy. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had spent months trying to protect her from this mess. But in the end, she had protected him. Jacob Whitmore approached, his face serious. Ethan, we need to talk. Ethan stood, pulling Sophia close. What is it? Jacob glanced around, lowering his voice. Grayson wouldn't have risked storming into court unless he had a damn good reason. This evidence, it didn't come out of nowhere. Ethan frowned. Then where did it come from? Before Jacob could answer, a voice interrupted them. Mr. Walker? Ethan turned. Standing a few feet away was a woman in a black blazer, her dark brown hair pulled into a tight ponytail. She had the air of someone who had been chasing the truth for too long. I'm Rachel Connors, she said, pulling out a small notebook. Investigative journalist. I believe you. Ethan stiffened. A reporter. Jacob groaned. No comment. I'm not here for a headline, Rachel said quickly. I've been investigating Lucas Crane for over a year. At the sound of that name, Ethan's stomach clenched. Rachel studied his reaction. You know who he is, don't you? Ethan clenched his jaw. I've heard the name. Rachel sighed. He's behind this. Sophia blinked. Who is he? Ethan's jaw tightened. A criminal. A manipulator. A man who ruined lives. Rachel glanced at Sophia, then back at Ethan. I know you don't trust me, but if you want to clear your name, you need to hear what I've found. Ethan exhaled sharply. He had spent the past few months avoiding reporters, avoiding attention. But something about this woman. She wasn't like the others. He exchanged a glance with Jacob. We've got an hour, his lawyer said. Might as well hear her out. Rachel nodded. Good. Because I think I just found the proof that Lucas Crane framed your friend. Ethan's heart stopped. If she was telling the truth, this wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. And they were running out of time. The scent of tomato soup and toasted bread filled the kitchen as Ethan Walker stirred a pot on the stove. Sophia sat at the table, swinging her legs, working on her homework. This was their routine, just the two of them. It had been that way since her mother passed when Sophia was only 3. Almost done, sweetheart, Ethan said, flashing her a tired smile. Sophia grinned. Can I tell you a joke now? Go for it. She took a deep breath. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Ethan played along. Why? Because he was outstanding in his field. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. That's a good one, kiddo. Then, a loud bang. The front door slammed open, crashing against the wall. Ethan's body immediately tensed. He spun around, dropping the spoon into the pot. A man staggered into the room. His clothes were torn, his hands covered in blood. His face was pale, drenched in sweat. Daniel Reese, Ethan's best friend. Sophia gasped. Uncle Danny? Daniel's chest heaved with ragged breaths as he gripped the doorframe. Ethan, I need your help. Ethan stepped forward. Jesus, Danny, what happened? Daniel glanced at Sophia. She, She can't hear this. Ethan hesitated. Sophia, go to your room. But, Daddy. Now, Sophia. She bit her lip but obeyed, grabbing her backpack and hurrying upstairs. But instead of closing her door all the way, she left it slightly open, just enough to listen. Downstairs, Daniel collapsed into a chair, his hands shaking. Ethan crouched in front of him. Talk to me, man. They're after me, Daniel gasped. Ethan frowned. Who? Daniel swallowed hard. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, the police. Sophia's breath hitched. Ethan stiffened. What? They think I did something, Daniel rasped. Something bad. Ethan's pulse pounded. Did you? No. I swear to you, Ethan, I didn't do it. But they don't care. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, Danny. What are they accusing you of? Daniel hesitated. Robbery. A warehouse break-in. A job I didn't even know about until the cops showed up at my place. Ethan exhaled sharply. Why the hell would they think it's you? Daniel clenched his jaw. Because someone made it look like me. Ethan froze. What? Daniel leaned forward. I was working at a garage under a guy named Lucas Crane. The name sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Lucas Crane. Ethan had never met the man, but he had heard of him. A businessman on the outside. A criminal mastermind underneath. Dirty money. Fake contracts. People disappearing when they crossed him. What the hell were you doing working for him? Ethan whispered. I didn't know who he was at first, Daniel admitted. By the time I figured it out, I was in too deep. When I tried to quit, well, you don't just quit on Lucas Crane. Ethan's stomach twisted. What happened? There was a robbery at one of his warehouses, Daniel said. The cops found security footage that showed a guy wearing my jacket, my hat. But it wasn't me. The tape was fake. But the police don't know that. Sophia, still listening from the stairs, felt her hands tremble. Ethan, please, Daniel begged. I just need a place to lay low until I figure this out. Ethan inhaled deeply, his mind racing. If Daniel was telling the truth, then someone had set him up. But taking him in? That was a risk. If the cops found out, Ethan could lose everything. He turned toward the staircase, making sure Sophia wasn't watching. And then, he made his decision. Stay here, he said. We'll figure this out. Daniel's eyes filled with relief. Thank you, man. Ethan gritted his teeth. He just hoped he wasn't making the worst mistake of his life. Rachel Connors leaned forward, her voice low. Lucas Crane framed Daniel. And I can prove it. Ethan stared at her. How? Rachel pulled a folder from her bag. A few months ago, I got a tip about Crane running a secret operation. Money laundering, fake identities, setting people up to take the fall for crimes they didn't commit. Ethan's jaw clenched. Why Daniel? Rachel sighed. Crane needed a scapegoat. Someone easy to frame. And Daniel fit the bill. Sophia tugged on Ethan's sleeve. That means Uncle Danny really didn't do anything bad? Ethan swallowed. It looks that way. Rachel handed him a file. This is a list of Crane's bank transactions. Payments made to dirty cops. Connections to judges. This man owns half the system. If we don't take him down the right way, he'll walk. Ethan flipped through the papers, his stomach tightening. This is why you barged into court today? He asked. Rachel nodded. And it worked. The judge is looking at this evidence now. But if we want Daniel free, we need more. Ethan exhaled. Like what? Rachel hesitated. Then she said, we need someone from inside Crane's organization to turn on him. Ethan shook his head. That's a death sentence. Rachel sighed. I know. Sophia looked up at them. Daddy? Ethan turned to her. Are we gonna help Uncle Danny? She asked softly. Ethan's chest tightened. He thought about that night. The moment he made the choice to protect his best friend. He looked back at Rachel. What's the next step? Rachel smiled. Now we go after Crane. Ethan clenched his jaw. No turning back now. Detective Mark Halloway stood in the dimly lit operations room, staring at the arrest warrant on his desk. The paper felt heavier than it should have, because it wasn't just an order to take down a criminal. It was a declaration of war. Across from him, Ethan Walker and Rachel Connors sat tense, waiting for his response. You're sure about this? Holloway finally asked, lifting his gaze to Rachel. She nodded. Crane's been buying cops, judges, and politicians for years. But with the evidence we have now, we can finally take him down. Holloway exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. Taking him down is one thing. Getting him to stay down? That's another battle entirely. Ethan leaned forward. Are you saying we shouldn't even try? Holloway sighed. No, I'm saying Crane isn't going to come quietly. He looked at Rachel. If we hit him, he's going to hit back. Hard. Rachel folded her arms. Then we make sure we hit first. The detective studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. He turned to his radio. All units, prepare for a raid. We move in 1 hour. The black SUVs rolled to a stop in the shadows outside a massive glass skyscraper, Lucas Crane's headquarters. Holloway's team moved with precision, officers in full tactical gear gripping their rifles. They had one shot at this. From inside one of the SUVs, Ethan sat beside Holloway, his hands clenched into fists. Are you sure he's in there? Holloway nodded. Sources say he never leaves before midnight. Ethan glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 11:17 p.m. Rachel was in the back seat, securing a hidden earpiece. Remember, she said, we need Crane alive. If he dies, we lose any chance at getting the people above him. Holloway nodded, then grabbed the radio. Move in. The security guards at the front barely had time to react before the police stormed through the entrance. Get on the ground, officers shouted. Alarms blared. Red warning lights flashed across the marble floors as the officers pushed forward. But something was wrong. Ethan could feel it. An itch at the back of his neck, a tension in the air that made his stomach twist. They were moving too easily. Rachel caught the same feeling. She pulled out her phone, scanning for security feeds. Something's off, she muttered. And then, boom. A deafening explosion ripped through the building. Glass shattered. The ceiling rumbled. Smoke and dust filled the air as officers scrambled for cover. Ethan hit the floor, covering his head as debris rained down. What the hell? Holloway coughed, pulling himself up. From the haze, gunfire erupted. Crane's men were waiting. The so-called raid had just turned into an ambush. Ethan grabbed a fallen officer's radio. We've been set up, he shouted. The SWAT team fought back, returning fire as Crane's guards emerged from hidden corridors, firing automatic rifles. Rachel crouched behind a desk, her heart hammering. They knew we were coming, she said. Holloway cursed, pressing his radio. Unit 3, I need backup now. Ethan's ears rang from the gunfire, his mind racing. Where's Crane? Rachel wiped soot from her face, glancing at a security feed on her phone. She froze. He's not here. Ethan's stomach dropped. They weren't just ambushed. They were distracted. Lucas Crane leaned against his desk, swirling a glass of whiskey in one hand. The blue glow of a laptop screen flickered against his sharp features. Beside him, Victor Hayes, his right-hand man, stood with his arms crossed. Crane smirked. I assume the cops are enjoying their little surprise? Victor nodded. They walked right into it, just like you said they would. Crane exhaled, sipping his drink. Predictable. That's why I always stay 10 steps ahead. Then, his eyes darkened. But Walker? He's becoming a real problem. Victor shifted. Do you want him taken out? Crane swirled his glass one last time, then set it down. No, he said. I want him to suffer. His lips curled into a cold smile. Take the girl. We need to get out of here, an officer yelled. The air was thick with smoke, bullets ricocheting off walls. Holloway grabbed Ethan's shoulder. We're pulling back. Now. But Crane. He's gone. Rachel shouted. We have to regroup. Ethan's fists clenched. He wanted to fight, but he knew she was right. The police began their retreat, officers covering each other as they pulled out of the building. As Ethan and Rachel reached the exit, Rachel's phone buzzed. A single text message. Unknown number. Time's up. Attached was a photo. Ethan glanced at it, and his blood ran cold. It was a picture of Sophia, bound, gagged, terrified. A message followed. You have 1 hour, Walker, or she disappears forever. Ethan's breath hitched. Rachel saw the message too. Oh my God. Ethan didn't think, didn't breathe. He just ran. Because nothing else mattered. Ethan sprinted through the police barricade, his lungs burning, his heart hammering against his ribs. Sophia was gone. The message on Rachel's phone repeated in his mind like a death sentence. Envelope with arrow, you have 1 hour, Walker. Or she disappears forever. The air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke from the failed raid, but none of that mattered. The moment he saw that picture of Sophia, bound, terrified, nothing else existed. Rachel caught up, panting. Ethan, stop. We have to think this through. There's no time to think. Ethan roared. Holloway grabbed his arm. Damn it, Walker. If you run straight into this, you'll get both of you killed. Ethan ripped free of his grip. I don't care. Rachel stepped in front of him. Listen to me. We need a plan. Ethan shoved past her. I'm not waiting. Rachel flinched. For a second, she saw something raw, primal in his eyes. Not anger. Not fear. Something worse. A father with nothing left to lose. Sophia Walker trembled as the cold metal of the van rattled beneath her. Her wrists ached from the tight zip ties, and the cloth around her mouth made it hard to breathe. Across from her, 2 men sat, Crane's enforcers. One was short and stocky with a scar running down his jaw. The other was tall, broad, his dark eyes cold and empty. Victor Hayes, the man who did Crane's dirty work. He glanced at Sophia, then checked his watch. 30 minutes. Sophia's stomach twisted. What happened in 30 minutes? The scarred man nudged Victor. Think Walker will trade? Victor smirked. Doesn't matter. We're not letting her go either way. Sophia froze. They were lying. Even if her dad gave them what they wanted, they weren't going to let her go. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to cry. She had to be brave. She had to warn her dad. Ethan gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. The city lights blurred past him as he sped toward the coordinates sent in the text. Rachel sat beside him, still trying to talk sense into him. Ethan, listen. Crane is playing you. He's not going to honor any deal. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then I'll kill him. Rachel's breath hitched. That's not who you are. Ethan snapped his head toward her. He took my daughter. Rachel swallowed. I know, and I will help you get her back. But if you walk into this blinded by rage, you'll die. And then Sophia will be alone. Ethan's grip loosened slightly. She was right. He forced a breath. Think, Ethan. Think. We need leverage, he muttered. Rachel nodded. Crane wants the evidence. But if we give it to him, we lose everything. Ethan's mind raced. Then, an idea. Call Holloway, he said. Rachel frowned. Why? Ethan's eyes darkened. Tell him to track my phone and bring everything he's got. Rachel hesitated. You sure about this? Ethan pressed the gas harder. We're not walking away from this without a fight. The abandoned shipyard loomed ahead, dark and empty, rusted shipping containers stacked like a maze. Ethan pulled up, headlights cutting through the mist. He stepped out, gripping the briefcase. Inside was the evidence that could destroy Crane. A single floodlight clicked on, illuminating a group of armed men. And in the center, Sophia. Ethan's lungs nearly collapsed. She was tied to a chair, her face pale but her eyes fierce. Lucas Crane emerged from the shadows, wearing his signature expensive suit. He smiled. Walker, right on time. Ethan stalked forward, eyes burning with fury. Let her go. Crane chuckled. You don't give the orders here. Ethan lifted the briefcase. This is what you want, right? Crane's eyes gleamed. Hand it over. Ethan hesitated. And then, Sophia spoke. Daddy, don't give it to him. He's lying. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Crane's face darkened. Shut her up. Victor Hayes moved toward her, but before he could, Ethan dropped the briefcase and lunged. Everything happened fast. Ethan grabbed Victor, slamming his head into the chair. Sophia screamed as the other guards pulled their guns. Gunfire erupted. Rachel, hiding behind a container, fired her pistol, hitting one of Crane's men in the leg. Ethan dodged a swing from Victor, grabbed a metal pipe, and swung it hard. It cracked against Victor's ribs, sending him staggering. Crane pulled out a gun. But then, sirens. The darkness exploded in red and blue lights. This is the police. Drop your weapons. Crane's men panicked. Holloway's squad stormed in, weapons raised. Victor Hayes tried to run. Rachel shot him in the knee. He collapsed, screaming. Ethan sprinted to Sophia, cutting her ties. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Daddy! Ethan crushed her against him. I got you, baby. I got you. Crane tried to flee, but Holloway tackled him hard to the ground, twisting his arms behind his back. Ethan turned, chest heaving. It was over. Lucas Crane was finished. Ethan sat on the back of an ambulance, Sophia wrapped in a blanket beside him. She wouldn't let go of his hand. Holloway approached. Crane's in cuffs. We finally got him. Ethan nodded, exhausted. Good. Rachel crossed her arms. You were right, Ethan. No way he was letting her go. Ethan glanced down at Sophia, stroking her hair. I wasn't taking the chance. Holloway sighed. You got lucky tonight. Ethan looked at him. No, I had something to fight for. Sophia yawned, snuggling closer. Daddy? Ethan kissed the top of her head. Yeah, sweetheart? She smiled sleepily. I knew you'd come. Ethan's chest tightened. He hugged her close. Always. The flashing red and blue lights painted the night sky, sirens wailing in the distance. Lucas Crane was on his knees, his hands zip-tied behind his back, his expensive suit now dirted and torn. Detective Holloway stood over him, breathless, his gun still trained on the corrupt businessman. It's over, Crane. But Crane smiled. Ethan Walker didn't like that smile. Not one bit. Crane chuckled softly, shaking his head. You really think this is over? Holloway narrowed his eyes. You're done. We have enough evidence to put you away for life. Crane smirked. Then why am I so calm? Ethan felt his stomach twist. A loud buzzing sound cut through the air. He turned. Headlights. From the far end of the shipyard, 3 black SUVs roared toward them. Crane's men. Rachel cursed. He had backup waiting. Holloway turned to his officers. Take positions. Gunfire erupted. Ethan grabbed Sophia, shielding her as bullets whizzed through the air, striking police cars and containers. One of the SUVs skidded to a stop, and a man in tactical gear jumped out, grabbing Crane and slicing through his zip ties. Crane snapped his wrists free, rubbing his hands before turning to Ethan with a smug grin. Told you. Not over. He climbed into the SUV. The tires screeched, and in seconds, Crane was gone. Ethan's truck raced down the highway, headlights cutting through the darkened streets. Sophia was in the passenger seat, gripping the armrest, eyes wide with fear. Daddy. I know, baby, Ethan said, voice tense. I know. Rachel sat in the back seat, reloading her pistol. They're coming. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. 2 black SUVs. Gaining fast. Hold on, he muttered. He slammed the gas. The truck roared forward, weaving between cars as the pursuit intensified. Gunfire cracked through the night. Bullets shattered the side mirror, sending shards of glass across the dashboard. Rachel ducked. They're not messing around. Ethan jerked the wheel hard, cutting onto a side street, barely missing a fire hydrant. The SUVs followed, tires screeching. Sophia held onto her seatbelt, knuckles white. Daddy, are we gonna crash? Not if I can help it, Ethan gritted out. Rachel glanced at her phone, then at the road ahead. There's a bridge up ahead. It's under construction. Ethan's heart pounded. Can we make it? Rachel hesitated. Maybe. Ethan pressed the gas harder. The bridge loomed in the distance, half-built, with a gap at the center. The SUVs behind them weren't slowing down. Rachel's eyes widened. You're not seriously thinking about? Hold on tight. Ethan gunned it. The truck raced up the unfinished section, wooden planks groaning under the weight. The gap was ahead. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut. The truck hit the edge and flew. For a moment, time froze. The city lights blurred. The only sound was Sophia's sharp inhale. Then, crash. The truck slammed onto the other side, tires screeching as Ethan fought for control. They made it. But behind them, the first SUV hesitated. Too late. With a sickening crack, the half-finished bridge collapsed beneath its weight. The vehicle plummeted into the dark river below. The second SUV barely stopped in time, skidding to a halt right at the edge. Rachel twisted in her seat, breathing hard. Holy! Ethan exhaled. His hands shook on the wheel. Sophia opened her eyes. Did we win? Ethan swallowed hard, looking in the mirror. The second SUV turned around and sped away. They weren't done yet. No, sweetheart, he murmured. Not yet. Ethan pulled into a quiet alleyway, parking behind an abandoned warehouse. He killed the engine, exhaling. Rachel turned in her seat. We need to move. That last car retreated, probably heading straight for Crane. Ethan nodded. We can't stay long. Sophia looked up at him. Where do we go now? Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face. Somewhere safe. Rachel's phone buzzed. She checked it, then stiffened. What? Ethan asked. Rachel hesitated. Crane just made a statement. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did he say? Rachel turned the screen toward him. A news broadcast played, showing Lucas Crane standing outside a luxury hotel, speaking to reporters. Ethan Walker is a fugitive. He kidnapped my daughter and attempted to frame me for crimes I did not commit. The police must act immediately before he harms her. Sophia gasped. What? That's not true. Ethan clenched his fists. He's flipping the story. Rachel swore. And people will believe it. He still has half the city in his pocket. Holloway's voice came through the radio. Walker, you need to lay low. Crane just put every cop in the city on you. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Crane had just turned him from the hero into the villain. Sophia shook her head. That's not fair. You're the good guy. Ethan sighed. Doesn't matter what's fair, baby. It matters what we can prove. Rachel looked up. Then we need to hit back. Ethan met her gaze. How? Rachel's lips curled into a determined smirk. We take this public. We show the world the real Lucas Crane. Ethan exhaled slowly. They had lost the chase. But the war wasn't over. The dimly lit warehouse smelled of oil and rust, the flickering light overhead barely holding on. Ethan sat at an old wooden table, his fingers running through his hair as Rachel paced the room. Sophia curled up on an old chair, still shaken from the chase. On Rachel's phone, the news played on repeat. Television, breaking news, businessman Lucas Crane has accused Ethan Walker of kidnapping and conspiracy. Police have issued a citywide manhunt. Ethan clenched his jaw. They had risked everything. And now, Crane had flipped the entire city against them. Rachel turned to him. We need to act. Now. Ethan exhaled. How? He owns the media, the cops, hell, probably half the damn government. Rachel's eyes burned with determination. Not all of them. She grabbed her phone and dialed. Ethan watched as she spoke quickly. Detective Holloway. We're going public. You in or out? A pause. Then Holloway's voice, gruff but steady. Tell me what you need. Rachel and Ethan hurried up the fire escape of an abandoned office building downtown. The rooftop overlooked the Avalon City skyline, the distant glow of police sirens flickering on the streets below. Rachel pulled out a portable broadcasting device, a backup plan she had stolen from a news station she used to work for. Ethan gave her a look. You stole that? Rachel shrugged. Borrowed. Sophia tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, what are we doing? He knelt down, brushing her hair back. We're telling the truth, baby. Rachel finished setting up the broadcast, fingers flying over her keyboard. We have one shot at this. If we hack into the news network's satellite, we can override their signal and push our story out first. Ethan nodded. Do it. Rachel hit a button. The screen flickered, and then the broadcast began. This is Rachel Connors, live from an undisclosed location. The media has been lying to you. Across the city, TV screens flickered to life. Lucas Crane is not a victim. He is a criminal, and we have the proof. Rachel uploaded every document they had, bank records, security footage, and secret payments to corrupt officials. He has framed innocent people. He has bribed police. He has silenced witnesses. And now, he has turned the law against the only man who can stop him. The camera zoomed in on Ethan Walker. I did not kidnap my daughter. I did not frame Lucas Crane. But if we don't stop him now, he will walk free. Ethan stepped forward. To every officer out there who still believes in justice, arrest Lucas Crane. Not me. We will not run. We will stand and fight. Rachel looked at Ethan. And now we wait. Lucas Crane's phone exploded with calls. His calm, smug demeanor was gone. Sir, Victor Hayes, still limping from his wound, held up a tablet. It's everywhere. Crane grabbed the screen. Crane has bribed officials, framed innocent people, and laundered millions. His hands tightened into fists. Victor looked uneasy. What do we do? Crane's eyes burned. We clean up. Victor hesitated. You mean? Crane's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Kill them. All of them. Victor swallowed hard. They have the whole city watching now. We can't just... Crane grabbed Victor's tie, yanking him close. Find them, and end this. Victor nodded, backing away. Crane smoothed his suit, forcing a smirk. Ethan, he muttered, shaking his head. You should have just stayed dead. Rachel's laptop buzzed with an alert. They found us. Ethan's stomach tightened. How long do we have? Rachel looked up, pale. Minutes. Sophia's eyes widened in fear. Ethan stood. Then we end this. Right now. He pulled his gun, checking the clip. How many men do you think Crane will send? Rachel grabbed her own pistol. All of them. The sound of SUVs screeching to a stop echoed through the alleyway below. Men in black suits and body armor piled out, weapons drawn. Victor Hayes stood at the front, smoking a cigarette, eyes scanning the rooftop. Come out, Walker, he called. Let's not drag this out. Ethan looked at Rachel. You ready? Rachel smirked. Let's be legends. Ethan turned to Sophia. Stay hidden, no matter what. Sophia clutched his sleeve. Daddy. Ethan kissed her forehead. I'll come back for you. Always. Sophia nodded, holding back tears. Ethan and Rachel took their positions. And then, all hell broke loose. Victor's men opened fire. Bullets tore through windows, shattered pipes, and sent sparks flying. Ethan returned fire, taking down 2 men as Rachel took out another. A grenade exploded near the fire escape, sending a cloud of smoke into the air. Victor yelled, Find them. Ethan grabbed Rachel's arm. We can't hold them off forever. Rachel gritted her teeth. We just need to hold them long enough. Ethan frowned. For what? Then, sirens. Red and blue lights flooded the alleyway. Detective Holloway's voice boomed through a megaphone. Drop your weapons. You're surrounded. Victor's men panicked. Rachel grinned. That's what we were waiting for. Victor cursed, realizing too late. They had been baited. The SWAT team stormed in, tackling the gunman to the ground. Ethan stepped out, gun still raised. Victor glared at him. You think this is over? Ethan smirked. Yeah, I do. He punched Victor across the face, knocking him cold, and then a single gunshot rang out. Ethan turned just in time. Lucas Crane stood at the edge of the alleyway, a gun smoking in his hands. His eyes wild, his suit disheveled. Walker, he sneered. I never lose. Ethan raised his gun. You just did. Bang. Holloway fired first, hitting Crane in the shoulder. Crane collapsed, cursing in pain. Ethan walked over, staring down at the man who had ruined so many lives. You're done. Crane smirked through the pain. We'll see. Holloway grabbed him, slamming cuffs onto his wrists. Lucas Crane was finally arrested. Sophia ran out from hiding, tears in her eyes. Daddy! Ethan scooped her into his arms. It was over. For real this time. Ethan Walker sat on the stone courthouse steps, his fingers laced together, elbows resting on his knees. For the first time in months, there was no gunfire, no sirens, no running. Beside him, Sophia leaned against his shoulder, doodling little flowers in the dust with her fingers. They were free. Lucas Crane was gone. After the shootout, the evidence Rachel and Holloway had gathered was indisputable. The jury had deliberated for less than an hour before delivering the verdict. Television Lucas Crane has been convicted on all charges, including conspiracy, corruption, and attempted murder. He has been sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Justice. Ethan exhaled, staring at the sky. It felt unreal. Sophia tilted her head up at him. Daddy? Ethan looked down. Yeah, sweetheart? Her blue eyes were thoughtful. So, it's really over? Ethan ran a hand through her golden curls. Yeah, baby. It's over. A familiar voice called from across the street. Hey, troublemakers. Ethan turned and grinned. Daniel Reese. For the first time in 6 months, his best friend stood a free man. Daniel walked up, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, shaking his head. You really had to do things the hard way, huh? Ethan chuckled. Wouldn't be our style otherwise. Sophia squealed and ran into Daniel's arms. Uncle Danny. Daniel laughed, lifting her off the ground. Man, I missed you, kid. Sophia beamed. You're not going away again, right? Daniel's face softened. Not if I can help it. Ethan watched them, his chest tightening with emotion. After everything, they had made it. Rachel Connors strolled over, smirking as she crossed her arms. You guys just ran around getting shot at. I did all the real work. Ethan scoffed. I seem to remember saving your ass multiple times. Rachel shrugged. Details. Sophia giggled. Rachel sat next to Ethan on the steps, sighing. So what's next? Ethan glanced at Sophia, watching her twirl in the sunlight. Then he smiled. We go home. Ethan stepped through the front door of their small house, carrying a cardboard box full of papers, old case files, and memories. Sophia ran ahead, dropping her backpack by the couch. I'm gonna put Mr. Bunn back in my bed, she declared, clutching her stuffed rabbit as she ran to her room. Ethan chuckled, setting the box down. For the first time in months, his house felt like a home again. Daniel plopped onto the couch. Man, I forgot how much I missed your terrible coffee. Ethan smirked. Still better than the crap they gave you in prison. Daniel shrugged. Fair. Rachel leaned against the doorway. So really, what now? You gonna open up the shop again? Ethan thought about it. Fixing cars felt small now. After everything they had fought for, everything they had won. Rachel read his hesitation. You could do more, you know? Make a real difference. Ethan smirked. Like run for mayor? Rachel rolled her eyes. Don't make me regret helping you. They laughed. Then Ethan's gaze drifted to Sophia's room, where she was humming to herself, arranging her stuffed animals. His heart softened. I just want to be a dad for a while. Rachel smiled. Good choice. Daniel lifted a mug of coffee. To fresh starts. Ethan clinked his glass against his. To home. Ethan tucked Sophia into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. She blinked sleepily. Daddy? He brushed her hair back. Yeah, baby? She hesitated. Are the bad guys really gone? Ethan's chest tightened. He thought about Crane, about the scars left behind. But then he looked at her. Safe, warm, alive. He smiled. Yeah, sweetheart. They're gone. She yawned. Good. 'Cause I don't want to fight crime when I'm older. Too much running. Ethan chuckled, kissing her forehead. Noted. She snuggled into her pillow, her voice soft. You're the best daddy in the world. Ethan swallowed hard. And you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Her eyes fluttered closed. Ethan sat there for a long time, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of peace settle over him. Then he stood, turned off the light, and closed the door. For the first time in a long time, he slept, and he dreamed of better days ahead.